Well, now let's turn to Luke chapter 21, because there are other things that we'll start noticing. And if you step back, this is all common stuff to us, but really it's happened in the recent past. Because the third trend that the Lord said would signal the end of days is the sign of, and by the way, these are not in order, and these are not in importance either. We're just going through them where we started last time. The sign of what I call global weather gone wild. We've always had bad weather. We've always had, the Wizard of Oz and tornadoes dropping houses here and there. But we have never had global weather events until modern times. In fact, one of the first global weather events that I remember was in the Christmas of 2004. And we'll talk about that if you can remember 4 years ago. But Jesus foresaw the time when the weather would be so bad that not just a few people affected by the weather, but the whole world would be troubled, fearful, and even killed by fear of chaotic weather that would become prevalent. Listen to the news if you're a news watcher or listener. How are they describing the current wildfires in Los Angeles? Why do they resort to biblical words? Have you heard how they're, the 800 houses or I don't know how many? What's amazing about that is that Sumatra trailer park, Bonnie and I drove by that thing. I used to drive by it every day when I'd speak and teach up the Master's College. I mean, it was the Beverly Hills of mobile homes. And it's gone. I mean, and you know what the newscaster called it? Armageddon. I thought, you think that's Armageddon? You haven't been reading the Bible. They just like to take our words. They don't really hear what's going to really happen. I mean, 600 trailers burning is not Armageddon. It is for them, but it's not in comparison to what's going to happen on a global scale. But Jesus said in Luke 21, and we'll get down to verse 25, He said that there is going to come a time when the whole world would begin to get fixated on events. That's part of the trend. One piece of it is they're going to be fixated on global weather and things that are going on that are beyond our control. I know that China tried to manipulate the weather for the Olympics. They were going to seed the clouds so it wouldn't rain on the events. And it didn't work really well. But, it's still, weather is still a little beyond our reach of controlling. But in Christmas of 2004, I'll always remember, I was sitting at my computer. I'd taken the kids off. We found a place that had wireless, and I was just catching up with emails. And while I was typing away, you kind of hear CNN at this coffee shop. You just going in the background, and I was just typing away, and I could hear talking, but you know how you don't really register. And as I sat there and was waiting, on the news it says that there's been an earthquake. And so I just went from email to Drudge. And just went over there, and it said right in the middle, it says, earthquake. He always likes earthquake, and he had a little map, and it had a red dot, and showed where it was. So I went back to emails, and about 10 minutes later I looked, and the next thing it said, and I wrote down the headlines, it says it was a rather large quake. And about 3 minutes later, it says, large quake strikes Sumatra. And then it begins saying, some people have died. Now you remember what I'm talking about, don't you? Almost 200,000 people died. And it was a major event 4 years ago. I mean, we've had so many cataclysmic events in the last 2 months, we don't even think 4 years back. We're thinking now day by day. I mean, did the stock market go up 800 today or down 800 today? I mean, did we lose $1 trillion or make $1 trillion today? It's just, that's how fast events are starting to go on our planet. But back then it was a little slower. But what the newscaster said is, it was probably the greatest disaster of this generation is when they counted all the casualties, they said. Well, Luke 21, look what it says in verse 25. And there will be signs in the sun, and we won't even go into that, the whole solar cycle. There's an 11-year cycle. There's all kinds of cycles in our sun that we do not understand. And if all of them converge, it's going to be amazing what's going to happen. If the sun blisters our whole protective, fields out there that hold back all that radiation, and if that solar wind comes through and blasts a few of those satellites. Remember the last big solar wind that went through? I was standing at a Get and Go, it's called, in Tulsa, and it's just a gas station. It had a little ATM machine in it, And when it was connected, the ATM machine, to one of those satellites that went out, did you know the thing started spitting out stuff? The clerk went over and put tape over it. He didn't know what to do. It was just starting to go, it got all mixed up and it was starting to put out receipts and money. Very exciting time. I thought, can you imagine if a solar wind comes and every ATM starts giving out money? And all the Christians would just give it right back, wouldn't you? Just take it to the bank and say, here, you guys have been charging me those terrible excessive funds, and I'm going to give some of them back to you. But no, just think of what will happen. But the event on that Sunday 4 years ago with the tsunami in Sumatra, all of us saw that event. If you had a television, you saw that wave come over and over and over again. Did you ever think about that? Within minutes of it striking, seismic stations picked up the magnitude, the news stations spread the word, and the whole world knew about it. That's knowledge increasing. But it's knowledge about what Jesus said. That there would be signs in the sun, in the moon, in the stars, and on the earth, distress of nations, with perplexity. And look at the middle of verse 25, the sea and the waves roaring, and so many people are going to know about it around the world. Verse 26 says that people's hearts will fail them from fear, expecting the things which are coming on the earth. Expecting the things that are coming? How do they even know they're coming? Because there's such an explosion of knowledge that you can watch streaming television on your phone. And people are going to be glued to their phone and they're going to see walls of fire or water or earthquakes. And people are going to, what it says right here. It says, verse 26, the first verb there is apsuko. It means expiring. People are actually going to, their spirit is going to go out of them. They're just going to collapse from fear because of what's happening. Well, the quake that triggered the tsunami, this is what the Italian National Geophysics Institute reported. It was the most concise report I could find. It said that quake caused the earth to wobble on its axis. The regional map of South Asia was permanently altered. The island of Sumatra moved 100 feet. The whole island. Remember what it says in Revelation? That there's an earthquake coming where the islands are going to disappear. Sumatra moved. That's a little trend. The whole earth saw an island move. A huge island, populated by many people, moved 100 feet. In fact, they said the impact of the 500-mile-per-hour waves was equal to 1 million atomic bombs. We only have 30,000. Russia only has 30,000. God did 1 million just like that. And that was little. In fact, it was so little. Think about this. If you want to talk about what the end of the world is going to be like, I already told you this in a different sense, but if there's 6 billion people, God says half of them are going to die during the tribulation. Do you know what that means? If half the world's population were to die by tsunami in just 42 months, which is what's going to happen in the tribulation, you would have to have a Sumatran tsunami not once a day. You'd have to have a Sumatran tsunami once an hour for 42 months. You'd have to have 200,000 people killed every hour for 3.5 years. 250,000 an hour for 42 months to do what God says is going to be done in the tribulation. No wonder Jesus said weather going wild would cause people to die from fear of what they saw coming. Can you imagine? You're watching on your cell phone, Hong Kong's gone. You go, oh. Then you're watching, Los Angeles is gone. And if you live in San Diego, you're going, That's what it's going to be like in the tribulation. Real quickly, turn to Revelation 11, and we will end in Revelation, because I want to show you the fourth one. And if you've never marked these, they're fun to mark, because did you know, Hal Lindsey proved it in the 70s. People are receptive whenever they think the Bible has anything to do with what's going on. You have to be careful. But there was a whole generation of people that were saved through the late, great planet Earth. You talk to people. You can find people that were saved in Billy Graham crusades, and you can find a whole group of people that were saved reading that thing. It scared them to death and made them go to church and say, is any of this true? And they found out about their sinfulness, and the greatest need was not prophecy, but salvation. But it's a great, great tool when people say, you're religious, aren't you? Does the Bible say anything about this? You say, oh, yes, it does. And you show them a few things, like you can show them Revelation 11, starting in verse 9. Because the fourth sign, if the first one is global travel, and the second one is exponential global knowledge increasing, and the third one is global awareness of weather, especially bad weather, the fourth one is that there is global telecommunications and television. That's kind of all tied together, because that's how they see the weather. But look how the Bible describes it. Because God's Word explicitly declares that mankind will be able to see and hear globally. When the world's fastest known means of travel in the time of John was the speed of a horse. When John wrote Revelation, you could either sail or take a horse pulling a chariot or galloping. And that was as fast as news went. I mean, they could try smoke signals, but, it broke down after a while. Or they could flash lights between mountaintops, but you didn't convey a lot of information flashing lights. You had to usually send a courier with a pack. And that's why, as I said previously, that wars could be, emperors could die on the battlefield and they didn't find out about it for 6 months. At home, news was slow. But John said this. He said, the whole world will see an event all at the same time and celebrate the event. Revelation 11 is the first instance of this. There are many. Revelation 11, 9, and 10, those from the peoples, tribes, tongues, and nations. Now, when you hear that at missions conferences, what does that mean? We're talking about people from the tongues and tribes and nations. We're talking about people scattered all over this planet. Not just one group, not one ethnic group living in one little area that can hear the news, but across a broad area. Those from the peoples, tribes, tongues, and nations will see their dead bodies 3.5 days and not allow their dead bodies to be put in the grave. That's the two witnesses. Verse 10, and those who dwell on the earth, that's the people even wider than the people that get to see them laid out, are going to hear about this, and they will rejoice over them, make merry, and send gifts to one another. There's going to be FedEx service or global UPS, not DHL. They're kind of going out of business. But there's going to be package delivering going on around the world. Look at 17 of Revelation, verse 8. Revelation 17:8 says, the beast you saw was and was not will ascend out of the bottomless pit and go to perdition. And Revelation 17:8 is another one of those globally witnessed, globally talked about and seen events. It says in the middle of this section, 8 and 9, it says, those who dwell on the earth will marvel, whose names are not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world. When they see, not when they hear about it 6 months later, not when the horse arrives with the scroll and it's nailed in the town square, and they finally ask someone to read it to them because they can't read. No, when they see the beast that was and is not and yet is. The Bible predicts the entire world will see certain events unfold. The invention of the television and the deployment of global satellite networks during the 20th century allowed news to travel the world at the speed of light for the first time ever. Remember, in the Apostle John's day, news traveled at the speed of horse. Today, news travels at the speed of light.